I have a few questions for you today. Number one, do you spend significant chunks of time trying to figure out if you're going to tell your partner about XYZ, wringing your hands, coming up with innumerable scenarios about how to say it, and then you don't? That ever happened to you? Or are you avoiding talking about something altogether that you've been struggling with for a while? Or see if this fits. Have you ever, in your relationship, current or past ones, have you ever had silent fuck yous where you've got the energy of that anger or that upset, but you don't say it out loud, and I'm not advocating that you do, but have you built up a stash of silent fuck yous that then just explode into a major upset over something really small? If your answer was yes to any or each of those, then you want to pay attention to what I'm about to share. I'm Geoff Laughton, your Relationship Architect.com, and welcome to part 5, the last part of this 5-part series called Setting Your Relationship Up for Success in 2019. So, one thing I want you to know is if you were a yes to any of those questions, then there's 2 reasons why that's happening. One is that you're having some kind of insecurity that it's okay that you want or need what you want or need. You're afraid that your partner isn't going to be good with that. Or you might be thinking that what you're wanting or needing is something that you really don't deserve to have. Maybe it's too much. Or maybe you're realizing that you've spent a long time not asking for hardly anything, or at least communicating what you're actually needing or wanting. And your mind gets you going around the merry-go-round. Maybe this is unreasonable. I keep not asking for it. Maybe I don't really want it. And you go into this mind, ego-driven mind chaos that just immobilizes you. So the other thing that's happening that's causing those kinds of scenarios I asked you about at the beginning is you're not being, and here's the V word that I'm referring to in the title of this talk, vulnerability. You're not being vulnerable. Now, I want to clarify that vulnerable has at least 2 meanings, right? One is that you're just laying yourself open, you're putting a big bullseye right here. Okay, shoot me, kick me, say bad things. Whip me, beat me, make me write bad checks. That's not the kind of vulnerability that I'm talking about. I'm talking about getting beyond and past your fear. Because fear is what's really running the show when this issue is at play. You're afraid that if you're really real or you're really honest, your partner is going to think badly of you, or they're going to leave you, or they're just going to get upset, and that's not okay. So you're letting the fear and whatever shame you may have already had drilled into you over your lifetime, particularly when you were growing up, that your feelings, your needs, your wants somehow aren't that important, or they're not enough. You're not enough to have them. That sounding familiar to you in any way? So you're not taking risks. You're letting fear, and fear is always created in here. So let me drill down a little bit more. Why are these things happening? Okay, fear of being vulnerable and fear in general. That's definitely one thing. Then, well, actually, let me give you an example. Let me tell you a quick story. I was just having a conversation not long ago with a good friend of mine, and he was talking about a conversation he had had with one of his kids, both adults, and it starts out just fine and connecting, it's all good. And then something gets said that all of a sudden gets one person very quickly. And when it happens like that, you've just tapped into a repository buried down in here in your body, in your subconscious mind. You've suddenly tapped into a book of green stamps, for those of you old enough watching this to even know what I'm talking about. But you've been saving up. Okay. Oh, there's another one. Okay. So the other person says something that suddenly brings that collection of stored up grievances. And in this conversation, all of a sudden, the anger is escalating, and then one of them says, well, fuck you. Now, this is not their normal way of being. Not the kid's way of being either, to be that pissed or to be saying stuff that's equally as inflammatory, which is what happened. And it just escalated, and then somebody hangs up on the other. And I can remember a time a few years back where with my son, we got heated about something, and all of a sudden we're in a parking lot, well, fuck you. No, fuck you. Great, two adults, right? But we were two adults that were not operating from our adult knowing. And so this happens in relationships all the time. It's called withholds. And withholds are the things you don't say. And those are the things that build up and create this reservoir of the silent fuck yous, the resentments, the hurts and the disappointments that you don't share in the moment. You don't talk about them. And this is the thing. In all the years I've been working with couples, hundreds of couples, the one thing that I can definitely say is always in the mix when somebody comes to me and, the relationship is struggling or on its last legs. The one thing that you can take to the bank is that a major factor in why you've gotten to that point, it isn't because of how well you communicate. It isn't just that you may have poor communication skills. The real problem is you're not communicating, period. You're blowing hot air and living in smoke and mirrors instead of taking the chance of being able to be vulnerable and share that you're hurt. Share that your feelings are hurt. Share that you're scared. And men that are watching this, we're not great at this. And yet, whenever a man is willing to be that open and truthful and can do it in a way that's respectful, fuck you is not respectful. There's no context in which it's respectful. Which is one of the reasons I have never said that to my wife in the 37 years we've been together, by the way. I just respect her too much to disrespect her by saying that. So that's kind of what drives that fear, sometimes not knowing what you're wanting to say. You feel a lot, but you don't know how to articulate it. And so this reservoir comes up, and a lot of the times, you guys, the stuff that you're afraid to say is built around what I call MUS, made up shit or stuff. It's stuff that your mind is making up, assuming, projecting, expecting, and then creating judgments because you're not getting what you expected, that, by the way, you hadn't bothered to share with your partner that you were expecting, so that they had an opportunity to go, yeah, I can do that, or no, I can't do that. Here's a counteroffer. So here are a few steps to take that you can use to begin making a difference if this is happening in your relationship. And again, I've never known a relationship, mine included, that this doesn't happen. Okay? So, step one, you've got to do your own reality check on what your expectations are and have they been communicated. What are your assumptions? Because I guarantee you, if you're getting upset and you're withholding stuff, it's because you had assumptions and expectations that have been disappointed, but you're afraid to say them. So look and see what's yours, in other words, so that when you do talk to your partner, you're able to actually perhaps lead off with, okay, I've been thinking or assuming XYZ about you, and I keep noticing that I keep getting really irritated and feeling disappointed, so I want to clear it up. Okay. Step two, you want to do one more reality check, because remember that if you're upset with another person, most or all of it is really about you. It isn't really about them. So when you look at what you're pissed off or hurt about with your partner that you're afraid to share or talk about, then you want to see and make sure how much of it is stuff that you should and can be dealing with that you're simply not. And so you can do that work to deal with what your issues are there. And then share that with your partner as a way of getting closer, rather than going, all right, well, I have to tell you, I just think you're an a-hole because you don't do this. Which immediately puts your partner on the defensive, right? Not that I've ever done that, mind you, but just, word to the wise. Step number 3. Step into and through the fear. Be willing to get messy. If you're a control freak, which most of us are, or, you grew up in a family where if you told the truth, you got nailed and hammered and abused, whatever, you will build up more self-resiliency if you're really clear about what you need to communicate and what's yours so that you can own that as you communicate. But you're not going to be so afraid that you've got to get everything perfect. Part of being vulnerable or open in the way I'm meaning it is you're willing to take a chance and you communicate your truth the best way you know how, again, respectfully, and you be willing to get messy. You realize that your partner's reaction is not an automatic invalidation of what you're needing or wanting. It's simply you're triggering something in them. But if you guys aren't talking about what's real and what's true, then you're always operating on that MUS I spoke about a few minutes ago. You're operating as if all that stuff you made up is the truth. And whenever I get to the bottom of what hasn't been said, that's really been creating the ruptures in the relationship, I can't tell you the percentage of it that is made up stuff. The other partner's going, what? You thought that isn't even remotely how I feel. So take the chance of being sloppy. Speak for yourself and start opening up, including emotionally. Particularly when you remember that if you're pissed, you're afraid, and/or you're hurt. So start communicating and feeling that hurt and sharing and feeling that fear with your partner. If you can tell that they're present, my experience is when people get vulnerable in that sense of the word, more often than not, the other partner softens, opens up. Because if you really love each other, you don't have an inherent desire to hurt each other. Okay. So that's the end of this series. Thank you very much for tuning in. And if any of these past 5 videos have really spoken to you and you really want to be able to hone in on what you can do with this, you want to go deeper into looking how this is playing out in your relationship and where your relationship foundation is strong or where it's cracked and needing some repair, or maybe your relationship needs a renovation or a remodel, then I invite you to go to yourrelationshiparchitect.com. And right on the home page in the right-hand corner, there's a box that says setting your relationship up for success. Get a relationship design review. So just click on that box and it'll take you to all kinds of information about what that is, what it looks like, and how it can benefit you. And if that speaks to you, then sign up for one. Okay, everybody. I'll be back next week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, just like every week, with some new stuff that'll get you ready for Valentine's Day. Live fiercely. Love fiercely. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.